is that as this is a growing opportunity for exports, that we need to grow with it. I'd like to yield to my colleague from Arkansas who's been kind enough to join us in this effort.
Well, thank you. I thank the senator from Illinois for doing that. And again, it's a real pleasure to be with he and the senator from Delaware. I think this is a good example of working together in the sense of trying to, the name of the game right now is jobs, 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 and exports means jobs. The other people that have been so very helpful are our colleagues in the House, Congressman Chris Smith, and then also Bobby Rush from Illinois. These guys have been very, very helpful. And then Don Payne, who is my former ranking member and then chairman, who recently passed away. I know that he would be very, very pleased with this effort. I've had the opportunity to travel to Africa on many occasions, being on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and now being in the Senate. And it's interesting, you go to these places, and you mentioned this, Senator, you go to these places and all they want to do is talk about trade. They like American products. They want American products. I was part of one of the first delegation to visit South Sudan. And here they are, this small, struggling company. And again, all they wanted to do was talk about trade. I need to...
Consent that we suspend our colloquy.
Without objection. The Majority Leader.
I hope that I haven't interrupted anything that can't be restarted in a short time. Thank you very much, everyone. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Foreign Relations Committee be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 1905, the Iran Threat Reduction Act, and the Senate proceed to its consideration. All after the enacting clause be stricken, and a substitute amendment, which is at the desk, which is at the text of Count Number 320, S2101, the Iran Sanctions Accountability and Human Rights Act, as reported by the Banking Committee, be inserted in lieu thereof, that the bill as amended be read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be laid upon the table. There be no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
The Senator from Kentucky.
Reserving the right to object, I'm amazed that the majority party objects to an amendment that simply restates the Constitution. Our founding fathers were quite concerned about giving the power to declare war to the executive. They were quite concerned that the executive could become like a king. Many in this body cannot get boots on the ground fast enough in a variety of places, from Syria to Libya to Iran. But we don't just send boots to war, we send our young Americans to war. Our young men and women, our soldiers, deserve thoughtful debate. Before sending our young men and women into combat, we should have a mature and thoughtful debate over the ramifications of war, over the advisability of war, and over the objectives of the war. James Madison wrote that the Constitution supposes what history demonstrates, that the executive is the branch most interested in war and most prone to it. The Constitution, therefore, with studied care, vested that power in the legislature. My amendment is one sentence long. It states that nothing in this act is to be construed as a declaration of war or as an authorization of the use of military force in Iran or Syria. I urge that we not begin a new war without a full debate, without a vote, without careful consideration of the ramifications of a third or even a fourth war in this past decade. I therefore respectively object.
The objection is heard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really am terribly disappointed. There's nothing in the resolution that talks about war. In fact, it's quite to the contrary. It's really unfortunate. I've read the Constitution a few times. My friend said he wants to restate the Constitution. Well, that's a strange version he just stated. I don't see that any place in the Constitution. So I'm deeply disappointed that the Senate wasn't able to enact additional critical sanctions against the Republic of Iran. The sanctions that came out of the Banking Committee unanimously are a key tool in our work to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons and threatening Israel and jeopardizing the United States' national security. It's a bipartisan bill which passed unanimously out of the Senate Banking Committee. It would have had much-needed new sanctions put in place now, right now, as we speak. And we could pass this legislation this minute if the minority would drop their opposition. We can't afford to delay these sanctions or slow down this process in any way. I'm willing to move this bill without amendments at any time. Now, Mr. President, I say to my friend, who I respect, I say to my friend, if there are additional things that should be done, I was told this morning that Republicans want to offer amendments to this unanimous consent request. I said no, because Democrats want to also. But we're satisfied with where we are. This is a wonderful piece of legislation done on a bipartisan basis in the Banking Committee. And if people like my friend, the junior senator from Kentucky, wants to do more, as my friends from this side and the Republican side, let's come up with something else. But I just think not to do this is really unfortunate. We are slowing down these sanctions. This is not a declaration of war, even anywhere within the neighborhood of that. We're slowing down these sanctions, and that is the way to avoid war. I'm willing to move this bill without amendments at any time, I repeat. I'm hopeful that my Republican colleagues will see the light and realize how important it is to advance this measure and prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons.
Mr. President.
The senator from Illinois.
Mr. President, I ask consent that we can resume the colloquy.
Without objection.
And I would, at this point, yield to the senator from Arkansas if he'd like to conclude his remarks.
The senator from Arkansas.
Thank the senator from Illinois.
The senator needs his microphone.
He does. Okay, we're in business now. Thank you, Mr. President. And again, I thank the senator from Illinois. And again, was just really making the point that as you go to these African countries, they want American products, whether it's the newest country, I guess, in Africa, South Sudan, or the older countries, and we need to have the ability to supply them. Both of you have mentioned China. China is certainly lurking out there, and again, it's not only China, it's India, it's a number of other countries. You might want to comment on that, Senator Coons.
Senator Boozman, you're right that there is a real challenge for the United States in the field of opportunity, which is Africa, and it's not just an economic challenge. We face competition from China, from Russia, from Brazil, from India, from other emerging and rapidly growing countries, but there's also a values challenge because, frankly, in countries I've visited, and I know both of you in your service to the public in the House and here in the Senate have visited more countries on the continent than I have, but I'm concerned that China's agenda in Africa is sometimes different from ours. It's not a values agenda. They're not there to promote democracy, tolerance, transparency, protection of intellectual property from piracy and counterfeiting. There's lots of different things that we advance in partnership with trade opportunities that aren't part of their issues and aren't part of what they try to advance. I'm impressed that Senator Durbin has pulled together an all-of-government strategy for dealing with this opportunity, and I'd be interested, Senator Durbin, in hearing more about the mechanics of how this bill will actually work to deploy all the different resources of the U.S. government.
I thank the senator from Delaware. This develops a comprehensive strategy to coordinate the agencies of our government in helping U.S. businesses export to Africa. Currently, U.S. export promotion and financing regime is a patchwork of overlapping, loosely coordinated, and maybe in some cases wasteful efforts that are difficult for U.S. businesses to navigate, too often unresponsive to the real needs of real business. This bill creates a special Africa export strategy coordinator to ensure this is no longer the case. He'll work with the existing export agencies and make sure they're on the same page. The bill establishes a minimum number of commercial foreign service officers to be stationed at U.S. embassies in Africa and multilateral investment banks. These are the men and women who are contacted by American businesses wanting to do business. They can navigate them through local government requirements as well as some of the other cultural challenges that they might face. The bill formalizes and standardizes the training received by economic and commercial officers. It also incrementally increases the amount of money that EXIM can loan over the next 10 years and creates a standard of accountability for those loans. Remember, this is only an increase in the lending limit, and these loans actually make money for the U.S. Treasury. Lastly, the legislation gives the Export-Import Bank a greater incentive to aggressively counter concessional loans, below-market loans, like the one I mentioned earlier in the case of Ethiopia and China, that countries such as China often use to undercut our bidding in the process. It was interesting, I might say to the senator from Delaware, that after the president of Ethiopia explained to me how the Chinese were offering these concessional loans. He then said, but of course then we turned around with the telecommunications contract and the Chinese won that too. He said they're winning everything. That's not good news for us. We have the capacity to produce goods and provide services competitive with any nation in the world. But once they haven't basically become a part of the local economy, and once they are part of the local culture, it's difficult for our companies to compete. And that, I think, is the real challenge that we face. So that's what this bill basically does. And I think it not only creates an opportunity to create jobs here, but as has been mentioned by Senator Boozman and Senator Coons, these are developing nations which are reaching a level of economic maturity. We want to be not only good trading partners, but partners with them in the future, developing not only good markets, but good values that are consistent with our view of democracy and the participation of people who live in each of these countries. I'd like to yield at this point to Senator Boozman.
Well, I agree with the senator from Illinois. You trade not only goods and services, but you trade ideas. And that's so important, as we go on. And certainly Africa is developing a very healthy middle class. This is certainly something new, that they haven't seen before. And again, they're hungry for American products. I appreciate the way that the legislation was crafted in the sense it's revenue neutral. There's no cost to the taxpayer. What we're trying to do is get a plan together to make it such, particularly our small businesses, so that they can compete with this huge continent that has so much going for it, and again, could be such a great help to a state like mine. We're talking about in Arkansas, we already export $5.6 billion in merchandise. I think one of the ways that we are going to climb out of the economic doldrums that we're in and create jobs is going to be through exports, and certainly this gives us an opportunity. Senator Coons, you could almost say, using the statistics from the senator from Illinois, he talked about 7 of the 10 top emerging economies coming out of Africa. We're almost doing a disservice to our small businesses by not going forward with this legislation.
That's right, Senator Boozman, and I'm grateful that you've been an active participant in helping pull together on this bill what has been a bipartisan consensus in this body and in the House on the importance of improving the access to the export opportunities of Africa for businesses large and small in the United States. Both of our states are well known for our poultry exports. All 3 of our states also have manufacturing exports across all the different sectors of our economy. We can't help but do better if we increase our exports to Africa. 50 years ago, roughly 70% of all U.S. funds that flowed towards Africa were development or relief assistance from U.S. government sources. Today, that's inverted. In fact, more than 80% of all U.S. dollars that flow to Africa are direct investment by the private sector. So, Senator Durbin, you've led the effort to create a wise bill, a smart bill that uses that leverage, that makes, as Senator Boozman says, the rapidly growing markets of Africa accessible to our home state businesses, large and small, but also makes a more efficient, more focused use of the dramatic resources of our federal government and makes it more accessible. What's next and where do we go from here?
Well, I can tell the senator from Delaware and Arkansas, if you ask the average American to give you their image of Africa, it will be an old image. The image of new Africa is a continent that is changing dramatically, as those numbers show, and listen to these numbers. In the year 2000, 7% of the population of Africa had access to the Internet, 7%. 2009, the number was up to 27%, almost a 4-fold increase in access to the Internet. There's also a revolution when it comes to mobile telephones. In 1998, there were fewer than 4 million phones on the entire continent. Today, there are 500 million, from 4 million to 500 million phones. And most people would assume, they have this image of the dusty little village in Africa where people live under pretty primitive circumstances. And that's true in many parts of Africa. But 78% of Africa's rural population has access to clean water. 78%. Clean water, access to information, and the global market are the pillars of building a middle class. In Africa, this means a middle class hungry for goods and services. And the United States can use that to our advantage. Now, I'm open-minded about this. I want us to be able to import from Africa as well, because that is the nature of a good trade relationship. It can't be all one-sided. Of course, our first priority is American jobs in Arkansas, Delaware, Illinois, and Colorado. But let's understand that as the middle class grows, their productivity will grow too, and what they can provide us can make a big difference. The World Bank said recently in a report, Africa could be on the brink of an economic takeoff, much like China was 30 years ago and India 20 years ago. So this bill promoting our trade into Africa couldn't come at a better moment. Senator Boozman, I'd like to yield to you at this point.
Well, I agree with the gentleman from Illinois and the senator from Delaware. The bottom line is that there is, just a tremendous opportunity for our country. I think that our country, as we do start the trade process, trading ideas, along with goods, that again, we're givers. We can be very, very proud of the work that we've done in Africa. Nobody's done more as far as whether we're talking about food. I was one of the co-chairs of the Malaria Caucus. We can be very, very proud that the work that the Congress has done in the last several years. And these are things that the Western world, can get together and eliminate. But along with that, as the potential increases, as the continent is settled down, as they're developing a middle class, 60% of the businesses that do exports are small businesses. And certainly we need to get in there. And with this bill, challenge us to increase by 200%. With this bill, it gives us the incentive. It gives us a template for how we do that. And then so that we can stop this erosion by the Chinese, where they're outdoing us by about 3-to-1 right now. The gentleman from Delaware.
Well, Senator Boozman, you're absolutely right. The significant investments that have been made by the last administration, the current administration, by Congresses controlled by both parties, in relief of the very broad health challenges throughout sub-Saharan Africa has produced dramatic results. Both positive results in terms of relieving human misery, but also positive results in terms of the view that most Africans have of the United States. This is the continent on the earth where we are most positively viewed. And we need to take that opportunity, take that platform, and use the tools that Senator Durbin is trying to craft through this legislation that we support to make sure that businesses, large and small, all across the United States, see this continent clearly as a continent of opportunity, as a continent where we have strong potential partners, and get us back in the race. Because frankly, right now, we have a moment, a wake-up call, when those of us who've been to Africa repeatedly, who see it as a continent of great opportunity, perceive that we are allowing other countries to rapidly move past us. We can, with Senator Durbin's leadership, with this bill, retake that opportunity, refocus our resources, and make this the decade when the United States and Africa, working in partnership, build and sustain tremendous growth in exports, imports, and trade. Senator Durbin?
Thank you, Senator Coons. I'm going to wrap up by just saying that I hope that we can change a few things in Washington as we look at Africa. I hope that the U.S. Commerce Secretary will travel to Africa. That hasn't happened in years. And I would encourage our Secretary to discover the opportunities on this continent for the good of our economy here in the United States. It's hard to imagine as well the Department of Commerce is actually cutting its Africa staff at this point, and the Export-Import Bank doesn't have an African staff at this point. This can change. The tremendous growth of the African economy and its middle class make lack of engagement inexcusable. We can reverse it. This bill is a step in that direction. As Senator Boozman says, it's modest, common sense. It doesn't add to the deficit. It thinks about ways to use current resources more effectively. It moves us in that direction with low-cost steps that will actually earn the U.S. money while creating U.S. jobs. And I'm going to yield on this issue and allow my colleagues to close if they have any closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Senator Durbin, and we do appreciate your leadership. Perhaps we could, the three of us, and maybe get some others to write a little note to the Secretary of Commerce and ask him to make a much-needed trip to Africa and really look at this bill and then not only do this, but other ways that we can use as a strategy to implement so that we can get our small businesses trading more with the continent. Again, keeping up with the likes of China, India, all of the places that we mentioned. And I think that once it's all over, we'll be very proud of our efforts, just like I'm very proud, as you all have mentioned, the efforts that we've made in feeding the hungry, helping with those with HIV, those with malaria and things like that. It is interesting that it is the place in the world where we have the highest, acceptability. People, are very pleased with what the Americans have done there. And our State Department's done a great job. We're teaching people how to fish rather than just feeding them. And that's been very, very successful. So I just appreciate your all's efforts. And hopefully we can get our colleagues together and get this thing passed.
Well, thank you, Senator Boozman, Senator Durbin, for the opportunity to join you today in this colloquy. I think, Senator Boozman, as you were referencing, this is just another example of how when America leads with its values, America will find success both for our workers, our families, our communities at home in terms of increased export opportunities, but also in terms of higher regard for our values, for our priorities throughout the world. When we are willing to take on the challenge of combating terrible diseases like HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria in partnership with research universities, in partnership with African universities and doctors and healthcare professionals, we can achieve remarkable results. But when we do, as Senator Durbin's leadership points us in the direction of doing with this bill, when we pull together all of our government, OPIC, EXIM, the Trade and Development Administration, the Department of Commerce, the Department of State, and we really deploy the strength and the capabilities of America's entrepreneurs and small businesses, the sky's the limit in terms of the difference we can make for the people of Africa and the people of the United States. Senator Durbin, thank you so much for your leadership on this important bill, and I've been grateful for a chance to join this colloquy with both of you today.
I thank my colleagues, Senator Coons and Senator Boozman, and I ask consent that this colloquy be brought to an end and that I be recognized individually in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I held a hearing last week in the Judiciary Committee on the question of an issue that most Americans are aware of but not aware of the severity of the challenge that we face. The issue relates to student loan debt. Last month, the National Association of Consumer Bankruptcy Attorneys issued an eye-opening report entitled The Student Loan Debt Bomb. The report pointed out that American student borrowing exceeded $100 billion in 2010, and the total outstanding student loans exceeded $1 trillion last year. There is now more student loan debt in this country than credit card debt. Of course, when used prudently, student loans can be valuable. I'm living proof. I borrowed money to go to college and law school. Couldn't have made it without it. Paid it back and felt that it was money well invested. I stand here today because of it. A lot of students have gone through the same experience. Unfortunately, too many students today are being steered into loans that they'll never, ever be able to repay. According to an analysis by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, 37 million Americans hold outstanding student loan debt with an average balance of $23,300. However, only 39% of those student loan borrowers were actually paying down on the balance. More than half of the student loan borrowers in the United States are unable to pay on their loan. The New York Fed study found that 14% of student loan borrowers, that's 5.4 million Americans, were delinquent, while the remaining 47% of borrowers were either in forbearance, which means a delay in payment as the actual cost of the loan increases, or they were still in school and adding to their debt. Last month, Standard & Poor's issued a report saying that student loan debt has ballooned and may turn into a bubble. Moody's Analytics recently said the long-run outlook for student lending and borrowers remains worrisome. The overall growth in student indebtedness is troubling. The most pressing and worrisome part of it are private student loans. What are these loans? These are loans given to individual students not by the federal government or through a federal agency, but rather through a private entity. According to Project on Student Debt, the most recent national data shows that 33% of bachelor's degree recipients graduated private loans, 1 out of 3, at an average loan amount of $12,550. Now, the difference is significant. Private loans to students in school are far riskier to pay. Federal student loans, through the government, have fixed, affordable interest rates, 3.4%. They also have a variety of consumer protections, such as forbearance in times of economic hardship, and they offer manageable repayment options, such as income-based repayment plans. Private student loans, on the other hand, often have high variable interest rates. 3.4% for a government loan, 18% for the student loans from a private source. We found that in our committee. That dramatic interest rate increase means that many students, unless they land a great job and can pay back quickly, will find the principal not being reduced and the interest building up over the years. Once a student takes out a private loan, that student is at the mercy of the lender. Every week in my office, I have invited students from across the United States to share their stories about private loans and what happened to them. I want to tell you one of those stories this evening. This young lady came to testify before my committee. Her name is Danielle Jokala. Danielle is a constituent of mine, lives in Illinois, and she appeared when we had a hearing on the looming student debt crisis. The odds were against Danielle. Both of her parents were high school dropouts, but because of the personal value education has for her, Danielle was determined to go to college. Not unlike a lot of young people these days, her family couldn't help her. She had to do it on her own. In the year 2004, she moved from Minnesota to Chicago to attend the Harrington College of Design, a for-profit institution owned by Career Education Corporation. Before I go any further, let me tell you the story of Career Education Corporation. November 1st of last year, the CEO of Career Education Corporation resigned after it was disclosed that this for-profit school had filed fraudulent information with the U.S. Department of Education about the number of students who were getting jobs after they graduated. It was such an embarrassment to the corporation that he was forced to resign. The parting gift for this embarrassing situation was a $4 million parachute to the CEO as he left the Career Education Corporation. He failed in his job and got rewarded for it. Now let's go back to Danielle's story. She didn't fail. She kept going to school. She fully trusted the staff at Harrington to help her with financial aid. They helped her fill out all the financial aid paperwork for her loans and made phone calls on her behalf. There was no discussion about interest rates and what the actual debt load would be by the time she finished. School employees never talked about monthly payments once she graduated, nor did they tell her about the kind of salary she could expect to earn on graduation, or the percentage of graduates coming out of the Harrington School of Design that actually found a job. In 2007, Danielle graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Interior Design. You can imagine how proud she was, coming from a family where no one had finished high school. After graduation, she started to pay back the following amounts that she had to borrow to graduate: $37,625 in federal loans and $40,925 in private loans. Danielle owed $79,000 when she got her bachelor's degree in interior design. Today, 5 years after graduation, she still hasn't found a job in that field. And she now doesn't owe $79,000. She owes more than $98,000. Those loans just continue to grow. She makes one combined payment each month of approximately $830. Nearly 28% of her current income goes to student loan debt. 25 years from now, 25 years in the future, if the interest rates hold where they are, she will have paid nearly $56,000 for her federal loan, which started off at $37,000, and nearly $155,000 for the $41,000 private loan. Approximately $211,000 she would have paid 25 years from now on her $79,000 debt. That's a staggering 264%. Mr. President, do you believe any college student could even understand when they're signing these loan forms what they're getting into? They assume that if the federal government loans money to the school, it must be a good school. Not true. Many of these schools, like Career Education Corporation, basically accredit themselves. They have what they call national accreditation. I've met with the National Accrediting Agency. It represents a lot of schools, some of which you're very familiar with in your state. It turns out that the for-profit schools have created their own accrediting operation. They look to one another to decide whether they're competent to hold themselves out as schools offering higher education. And the Department of Education accepts it. So what's a student to think? I'm going to an accredited school, nationally accredited school. The federal government is offering loans, maybe even Pell Grants. Student would assume this must be a good school. Secondly, of course, they have a situation where the cost of these for-profit schools is dramatically higher than public education or even private not-for-profit schools. The amount of indebtedness of the students, dramatically higher. And more of these for-profit private schools are dragging the kids, the young students, into debt with private loans with absolutely explosive terms to them. There's one thing I haven't mentioned which bears saying. Under the current law, no student loan is dischargeable in bankruptcy. Not ever, except under the most severe and extreme circumstances. Hardly ever happens. It means that the loan papers you signed at the age of 21 are going to be with you for a lifetime. And if you aren't one of the lucky ones, landing a good job, making enough money, you will watch what happens as that student debt increases. Danielle's debt went up from $79,000 in 5 years to over $98,000, and it continues to grow. I asked her about her lifestyle. 32 years old, married. She's trying to do the best she can. She can't go back to school. Impossible. She can't borrow money to do that. She's looking for a job and trying her best. And she said, it looks like I'm going to lose my home over this. It's just a little house my husband and I were working on paying for. We just can't do it anymore. Age 32, virtually in debtor's prison to these private loans and federal loans for what? For making the mistake of going to college? I don't happen to think that's a mistake. For most of us, it was a ticket to a future. She thought it was a ticket to a future for her. It turned out to be a ticket to a life of debt. What are we going to do about this? We're just going to shrug our shoulders and say, you know, these students, they ought to think twice about signing up. Or their parents who co-signed, they should have asked harder questions. Or are we going to be more honest about this? The current situation has to be examined in honest terms. How many private loans are now not dischargeable in bankruptcy? What other private loans would be not dischargeable in bankruptcy? The answer is none. None. The only things non-dischargeable in bankruptcy are federal student loans, taxes that you owe the government, child support, and alimony. And now these private loans from school have been added a few years ago. We gave them the sweetest deal of any creditor in America. No other private creditor gets that protection in bankruptcy other than those issuing private student loans, mainly for-profit schools. And you say to yourself, Congress, why did you do that? Why did you offer that kind of a benefit to one tiny sector of the economy? And the answer is, there wasn't a lot of debate about it. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. It was in the bankruptcy reform bill, which I voted against, and it was stuck in there. A provision was stuck in there that gave them this sweetheart arrangement, the sweetheart deal. Well, it may have been a sweet deal for the schools and the private lenders. It sure isn't for Danielle. I don't know what to tell this young woman. There's no place for her to turn. At age 32, that's her plight in life now, and it's happening more and more. What I read to you earlier about this looming student debt crisis and the fact that we could be dealing with a bubble is something we ought to take seriously. It's a serious problem. The volume of private student loans is down from its peak in 2007, once accounted for 26% of all student loans, but we know that private lending is still being aggressively promoted by the for-profit college industry. Mr. President, I always put these numbers on the record so people can put it in perspective. 10% of the post-secondary students in America attend for-profit colleges, 10%. The for-profit colleges receive 25% of all federal aid to education. 10% of the students, but 25% of the federal aid to education. We had to put a statutory limit on the federal subsidy of these schools at 90%. They can receive no more than 90% of their money at a for-profit school in money directly from the federal government, loans, Pell Grants. Then we waived it for the GI Bill. so it can go up to 95%? These are the closest things to government agencies with multi-million-dollar parachutes for their CEOs that I've ever seen. And yet, we turn our back and say that's the way it works. The Project on Student Debt reports that 42% of for-profit college students had private loans in 2008, up from 12%. For-profit college students also graduate with more debt than their peers. And the last statistic, 10% of the students, 25% of the federal aid to education, 47% of the student loan defaults through for-profit schools. The answer is obvious. They string these kids out, bury them in debt, they end up graduating, and they can't find a job to pay off their debt. And we sit here and say, gosh, I wish there was something we could do about it. There are a lot of things we can do about it. We need to take action. I've introduced legislation, the Fairness for Struggling Students Act. It restores the pre-2005 bankruptcy treatment for private student loans. If those for-profit schools and those creditors making private student loans knew they were dischargeable in bankruptcy, would they ask harder questions about the payback? Would they be more concerned about whether the student's actually going to end up with a job? You bet they would. There's no reason why private student loans should get treated differently than any other private debt in bankruptcy. And it's especially egregious. These private loans are non-dischargeable, where a student was steered into a loan while the student still had eligibility for the much lower costing federal student loan. Think about that. Here's a student that's eligible for a 3.4% federal student loan, being lured into a private loan at 18%. As long as they have eligibility for the federal student loan, the private loans should not be made, certainly shouldn't be dischargeable in bankruptcy. I'm encouraging my colleagues to take a hard look at this issue. Bet you a nickel that if you went to a town meeting in any town in America, in Illinois or any other state, and asked folks there, anybody have any concerns about student loans? Watch the hands go up. People are worried about it. The last example I'm going to use is one of the people who works in my federal office building, a wonderful lady who cleans up the building, and we've gotten to know her. She speaks English. She's an immigrant to this country, limited command of English, but a hard-working person. Her daughter graduated from high school with a GED, and she ended up so elated that her daughter finally made it through high school, and then came in within days and said, I've got great news. My daughter was accepted at college. And it turned out she was accepted at Westwood College. Westwood College accepted her and offered her a degree in law enforcement. Well, we asked her mother, what's it going to cost? Well, it's the $5,500 Pell Grant plus $17,000 more for 1 year. This college, unfortunately, has become notorious. It's under investigation by the Illinois Attorney General for these very loans. Students who watch all these crime programs on TV can't wait to become part of law enforcement. Here's the bad news. Westwood College's law enforcement degree is not accepted by any law enforcement agency in Illinois. It is not a legitimate college degree. Well, we called Westwood because we've been through this with them before many times and said if you don't tear up those papers right now and allow her mom and her to walk away from this, there'll be a press conference out in front of your building tomorrow morning. They tore up the paper. But sadly, many college students who went to Westwood didn't have that good result. The worst one I know of is a young lady living in the basement of her parents' home now, a graduate of Westwood with a worthless law enforcement degree, $90,000 of debt, nowhere to turn. She's in her late 20s and nowhere to turn. That is the reality of what's happening out there in the real world. We have a responsibility here, a responsibility to these students, these leaders of tomorrow, a responsibility when it comes to the reputation of education in our country, to step in and police the for-profit schools that are not doing a good job, that are taking advantage of students and leaving them deeply in debt with worthless diplomas. It's not an issue that people jump up and say, let's get down to the floor and join Durbin on this one. It's just not that interesting to a lot of folks yet. I'm afraid it will be. If this looming student debt crisis grows, there will be more and more tragic stories like the one that I put in the record today about Daniel Jokola. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise to speak on the issue that is before us today on the floor of the United States Senate, and that is the issue of high gas prices. I was home in Wyoming, filled up again this weekend, as I do most weekends, and today the average price of gasoline, regular unleaded gasoline, nationwide, $3.91 a gallon. That's about 20 cents more than it was a month ago. People at home in Wyoming see the prices continue to go up week after week. High gasoline prices are causing hardships for American families and American businesses. When families pay more at the pump, they can't spend money on other goods and services. For families dealing with kids and a mortgage and bills, they know the specific impact as they fill their car or truck and see that price rise to the point where it's almost, if not more than $100 to fill the tank. Also, when companies pay more for gasoline, they have less money to expand their businesses, and that hurts job creation in this country. Wyoming families and Wyoming businesses know this all too well because in Wyoming we drive longer distances than most Americans. The President also knows this, and that's why he continues to give speeches on energy. It's clear that the President is defensive on this issue. Well, I've heard the speeches, and I say pay less attention to what he says, pay attention to what he does. The average price of gasoline, regular unleaded gasoline, over 100% higher than it was when President Obama took office. I'll say that again. The price of gasoline is over 100% higher than it was when President Obama took office. It is clear the President's policies are contributing to higher gas prices. But instead of changing course, President Obama, Democrats in Congress are doubling down on bad policies and desperate schemes. Here's an example. One Senate Democrat, someone across the aisle from me, has said that let's and ask Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. It's exactly what it said. It said a solution is to have the Secretary of State ask Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. And now President Obama and Senate Democrats want to raise taxes on American oil production. So we're going to ask Saudi Arabia to produce more and yet raise taxes on those who are producing American oil. So the President, the Democrats want more oil from Saudi Arabia. And they also want to make it more expensive to produce American energy. The legislation on the floor, to me, doesn't make sense, and the American people recognize that it doesn't make sense. Americans know that if you want less of something, you tax it more. They also know if you want to increase the cost of something, you tax it more. Raising taxes increases the cost for consumers. And that is the effect what President Obama and Senate Democrats are doing with this legislation. They are proposing increasing gas prices by increasing taxes. Even the author of this legislation has said, quote, nobody has made the claim that this bill is about reducing gas prices. So then why would President Obama want to increase gas prices 7 months before a presidential election? Well, it appears to me that it's because his political base fiercely opposes fossil fuels. Now, that shouldn't surprise anyone. We have seen this before. And of course, I'm referring to the President's rejection recently of the Keystone XL pipeline, bringing energy from Canada into the United States. This Keystone XL pipeline would have created thousands of good-paying jobs for Americans. The President said no. The Keystone XL pipeline would have facilitated oil production in Montana and North Dakota. The President said no. The Keystone XL pipeline would have increased supplies of oil from Canada. The President said no. To the point that the Prime Minister of Canada actually went to China to ask if they would buy the energy from Canada if the United States isn't interested. So why would the President reject it? Well, because his political base has fiercely opposed the pipeline. Now the President wants to have it both ways. He would like to please his political base as well as the American public. That's why the administration wants to go hat in hand and ask Saudi Arabia to produce more oil. It's also why the President is considering plans to tap the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, This would be the second time that President Obama tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Last June, you recall, the President released 30 million barrels of oil from the reserve. Prior to that, it had only been tapped twice for emergencies since 1975. So between 1975 and June of 2011, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve has only been tapped twice for emergencies. It was tapped in 1991 upon the outbreak of the Persian Gulf War, and it was tapped following Hurricane Katrina. Now, in both instances, those were real disruptions of the supply of oil to the United States. But when President Obama tapped the Strategic Reserve last year, there was no substantial prospect of a supply disruption. His decision at the time was based on politics, as would be his decision to tap it now. That's why Jay Leno recently called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve President Obama's strategic re-election reserve. Well, my Republican colleagues and I think there are other ways to address high gas prices. The other is that when they tapped the Strategic Reserve last year and took out the 30 million barrels, they didn't actually refill it. So the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is not filled up right now. It is lower. Just to fill it back to where it should be, its baseline level, would cost actually almost $1 billion more than they got when they sold the oil last year. I believe there are things that we should be doing and can do that will enhance, not jeopardize, our nation's security and specifically our nation's energy security. We understand that the Strategic Petroleum Reserve is for emergencies, not political disasters. And we understand that if you want more of something, or if you want to lower the cost of something, you don't raise taxes on it. What you do is you make it easier to produce the product. That's why my Republican colleagues and I support making it easier to produce American energy. And it is why we are asking the President to make it easier to produce American energy. Not harder, not more expensive, but easier. A few weeks ago, we learned that the oil and gas production on federal lands and waters is down. Specifically, we learned that there was a 14% decrease in oil production on federal public lands and waters from 2010 to 2011, and an 11% decrease in gas production from 2010 to 2011. Again, the President has made it easier. The President has not made it easier, but he must make it easier to produce American energy. The President can begin by increasing the number of permits issued for exploration in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, it's my understanding that there are only 25 deepwater rigs active in the Gulf right now. I understand that 34 deepwater rigs were active in the Gulf at this time in 2010. The administration needs to approve more permits and to do it immediately. The President should also increase access to other offshore areas. He should provide access to offshore areas in the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. In November, the President proposed an offshore oil and gas leasing plan that amazingly excluded the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. He excluded areas off the coast of Virginia, even though both of the senators, both members of this body, who are Democrats, as well as the governor of Virginia, who is a Republican, all of them support such exploration. The President should also increase access to onshore areas. The President should open up areas of Alaska. And we should support proposals to open up ANWR. Both senators, a Democrat and a Republican, and the governor of Alaska strongly support opening up ANWR for energy exploration. The President should, too. The President should also take steps to facilitate onshore production in the West. Specifically, the President should scrap new regulations requiring master leasing and development plans. These regulations were put into place over 2 years ago by the Secretary of Interior. It's unclear to me why the Secretary issued these regulations. They add more red tape, they cause more bureaucratic delay, and they slow down American energy production. Now, of course, there are other regulations that are driving up the cost of American energy. Specifically, the EPA's forthcoming Tier 3 regulations. That will affect America's refineries. A recent study shows that this rule could increase the cost of manufacturing gasoline by 6 to 9 cents a gallon. This rule could also raise annual compliance costs for refineries by billions of dollars, and it will almost certainly increase the pain at the pump that's being felt by American families. To me, this is unacceptable. The President should, at the very least, delay the issuance of this rule. In addition to providing more access to federal lands and waters and eliminating burdensome regulations, the President should address delivery bottlenecks. Specifically, he should address all the bottlenecks that the Keystone XL pipeline would relieve. Here, of course, I'm referring to the 100,000 barrels of oil each day that Keystone would ship from Montana and North Dakota. That's right, homegrown American energy from Montana and North Dakota. Right now, there isn't sufficient pipeline capacity out of North Dakota and Montana. You know how they're getting the oil out of there? Well, they're shipping it on trucks and in trains, and that's a lot more expensive than shipping it by pipeline. The Keystone XL pipeline would reduce the cost of shipping American oil. In addition, the pipeline would ship about 700,000 barrels of oil a day from Canada. The Canadian oil would replace oil imports from OPEC and thus increase our nation's energy security. Approving the Keystone XL pipeline is an easy decision, and the President should make that decision immediately. Again, the President must abandon his support for policies such as this legislation that's ahead of us today, which will only increase the pain at the pump. And we must abandon plans which will put our nation's security further at risk. Instead, the President must make it easier to produce American energy. He should increase access to federal public lands and waters, eliminate costly regulations, and approve the Keystone XL pipeline. It is my hope the President will take all of these steps and do so immediately so the American public does not continue to suffer the significant pain at the pump that continues to affect our country today. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from Alaska.
I'd like to enter in a colloquy with my colleague from Louisiana.
Without objection.
Mr. President, just as I expected, we'd be in this back and forth show and tell on oil and gas issues, and instead of really spending the time and working on a real energy plan, one that is important for not only my state, my colleague's state, but for the whole nation. So we're back and forth, and it's politics as usual in this chamber. I mean, we just heard a nice presentation by my colleague from Wyoming about how it's all the president's fault and prices are going up and all these other issues. And let me just say this, and I know my friend from Louisiana knows this. In Alaska, there's a clear indication of what we feel when it comes to energy prices. We have communities that pay $9, $10 a gallon for heating fuel. We understand when costs go up, what happens to our economies in our rural communities. We also are a producer of oil and gas, and we understand the potential and the job opportunities. But, you know, this last week when we started to move on this bill, I know my colleague and I were just one of, or two of four people that said, no, we're not moving on this bill, because I expected exactly what's going on now. We're just doing a little show and tell, having a little argument back and forth, and in another 24 hours or maybe 30 hours, we'll be off this bill and we won't have an energy plan. And when I go back home for our break, when I'm talking to Alaskans, as I know you will be talking to folks in Louisiana, they'll complain about gas prices and heating costs and how much it costs to fill their car or their RV if they're trying to go somewhere on the weekend. And we haven't done anything to really make a dramatic change. And, of course, you know, this idea of eliminating these incentives for the oil and gas industry I've opposed from day one for a variety of reasons. One, if you're going to do real tax reform, then you should do a broader sweep and no industry should be left off the table. Everyone should be part of the equation. I've heard this from the industry. I know my colleague has heard it from the industry that they're willing to be part of the bigger picture, but don't single them out because poll numbers say they're the demon of some sort or people don't like them. Let's talk about real tax reform. That's one debate. The other debate is if we really want an energy plan, then let's really do one. Let's focus on the opportunities and let's quit putting pieces that one side puts down because it sounds good for their brochure and another one puts down. Let's really focus on something that will make a huge difference to this economy. As I mentioned, in Alaska, fuel is expensive in our rural communities for heating, and communities of Fairbanks are a very urban area. It can pay upwards in the winter, $1,000, maybe more per month in heating costs, making it their ability to survive very difficult. And, you know, as we work on these energy projects and what's important, let me put another thing in perspective from Alaska. You know, people think Alaska, all we care about is oil and gas. Well, we do. It has a lot of jobs. But we also care about renewable energy. I know I've been on the floor talking about that. My colleague has been on the floor talking about renewable alternative energy. It's all part of the equation. How to ensure that we develop a plan, we diversify our energy resources, and then we deliver it for the betterment of this country and economically in order for us to survive. And in Alaska, for example, as we work on oil and gas development, we're also moving forward on renewable energy. Our state has now 25%, just about 25% of our energy production for use in state is renewable energy, with a goal to be at 50% by 2025. We have a plan because we understand the value of it. I want to show you a chart, and then I know my colleague has some comments, and we'll probably go back and forth a little bit here, but I want to show you this one chart. This is when I came in the office, and my colleague over here talked about ANWR. I support ANWR. I'm aggressive about it. Beyond belief. My colleague has been, before I got here, she was pounding away on this issue also, and it's important. But we have 4 regions up in Alaska that are of high value, and when we talk about oil and gas in Alaska, at least from our office, we talk about everything that's possible. We talk about ANWR. We talk about the National Petroleum Reserve, which let me make that point, National Petroleum Reserve. It's designed for petroleum production. Chukchi over here in the Beaufort Sea. These 4 regions have huge value to the oil production of this country. And when we talk about this, where are we today? What can it do? What can it replace? Well, it can replace countries like Libya and Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, where we get oil from. We could actually produce it here. And the good news is we're on the path to do that. Now, has it been long and tedious? Yes, it has. But are we moving in the right direction? Yes. We have seen for the first time in 30 years opportunity to develop in the Arctic that we have not seen before. We're seeing for the first time this summer Shell is moving their ships up to the Chukchi Sea, because the potential between Chukchi and Beaufort alone is 24 billion barrels. Let me repeat that. I know we deal with these numbers in our 2 states. Billions. Billions. And when you look at this, Chukchi, 15.4 billion, plus a little side product, gas, which we love gas because it's clean burning, 77 trillion cubic feet. Beaufort, 8.2, and this is what we know best today on our estimates, which they're doing exploration now, so we're going to find out more opportunities. 28 trillion cubic. NPRA, National Petroleum Reserve, 1 billion what we know, and they're in production this year. ConocoPhillips will be developing in there what they call CD5. ANWR, still a struggle, but 10.4 billion barrels. Still an important piece where a small little component of this would be developed, 2,000 acres out of 19 million acres. That would be the footprint that we would utilize. But the point is, what I'm trying to make here is if we want to get onto a real energy plan, then let's do that. I know that folks on the other side did their vote. I mean, it was amazing. It shocked me, actually, that they voted to move forward. They hadn't done that, and I don't know, ever since I've been here on that bill. And it's because they wanted to do show and tell for a week, get some press, beat up the president because of presidential politics. You know, I have my differences with the president. We fought him a lot on these issues. But what I'm interested in, what I came here for, and I know you came years ago for, and that is let's do a real energy plan that develops our country to be more self-sufficient on our own energy resources, and let's do it the right way. Let's have the real debate that will make the difference for the consumer. So when I go home and my colleague goes home and someone says thank you because you set in motion a trend that will lower or stabilize gas prices for our homes, for our cars, for our businesses, for transportation in general. That's what we should be doing. But instead, we're going to burn up a few days here and make a lot of speeches, and then we'll move on. Well, I will tell you, and I think my colleague will agree with me on this, that two of us aren't going to stop. We're going to talk about an energy plan, because that's what we need in this country if we want to grow this economy, if we want to make ourselves more self-sufficient and more secure nationally. What's happening in the Middle East? Price goes up. Not anything we're doing. And we have some good news. I mean, even though it's predominantly private land that's been the growth factor of oil and gas, we are seeing more domestic production the first time in 10 years. I don't know. To Senator Louisiana, I think that's a good thing. I think, right?
Good thing. And the senator from Alaska is, as usual on this subject, right on and in the mainstream